The day had started like any other for the CEO. He had a long day of meetings ahead, with important calls scheduled with clients and partners from around the world. As someone who had worked tirelessly to climb to the top of the corporate ladder, he was used to long hours, travel, and the demands of his position. First-class travel was a small comfort, a moment of peace in an otherwise hectic life. He arrived at the airport with his briefcase in hand, wearing a neatly pressed suit, confident and composed. After checking in, he made his way through security and toward the first-class lounge. The lounge was quiet and inviting, a stark contrast to the bustle of the main terminal. He found a seat, took out his laptop, and began reviewing the notes for the upcoming meeting. Everything seemed perfectly normal. People were coming and going, sipping coffee, reading newspapers, and checking emails. He felt the familiar calm that first-class travel often brought him. When it was time to board, he walked to the gate, showing his boarding pass to the attendant. He expected the usual warm greeting and smooth transition to his seat. Instead, things took a surprising turn. As he approached the first-class cabin, he noticed a few flight attendants whispering and exchanging glances. One of them stepped forward and asked to see his boarding pass again. He handed it over without hesitation, expecting the usual verification. But then he heard words he never expected. He was being asked to leave the first-class cabin. He was stunned. Confused, he asked why. The flight attendant hesitated, seeming unsure, and then said there had been a mistake and he would need to move to a different seat. He tried to remain calm, explaining that he had booked first-class months in advance and had confirmed his seat just days earlier. He even showed the email confirmation on his phone, highlighting the seat number, the booking reference, and the details of the payment. Yet, the attendants insisted that he could not stay in first class. Other passengers began to notice the exchange. Some looked on curiously, while others whispered among themselves. He could feel the tension in the air growing. His colleagues and fellow travelers stared, some with sympathy, others with confusion. He felt a mix of disbelief and frustration. This was not just about a seat. It was about respect, fairness, and dignity. He had always treated airline staff and fellow passengers with politeness and patience, and he expected the same courtesy in return. He asked to speak to the gate supervisor, hoping that a higher authority would resolve the misunderstanding quickly. The supervisor arrived, listened to the explanation, and after a few minutes of discussion, still insisted that he could not stay in first class. The reasoning was vague and unconvincing. He remained composed, carefully choosing his words, emphasizing that he had paid for the seat and had every right to occupy it. Despite this, the decision was final, and he was escorted to another section of the plane. As he walked through the cabin toward the assigned seat, he noticed the glances of other passengers. Some offered apologetic smiles, while others avoided eye contact. He felt a rush of emotions. Anger at the unfair treatment, sadness at the prejudice implied by the situation, and disbelief that something like this could happen to someone of his position and experience. He took his seat in the business section, slightly behind first class, and tried to collect his thoughts. He knew he needed to handle the situation carefully, without letting emotions get the better of him. The flight took off, and he sat quietly, observing the cabin and reflecting on the incident. He thought about how far he had come in his career, the challenges he had faced, and the moments of triumph he had earned through hard work and determination. Yet, here he was treated unfairly simply because of appearances, assumptions, or bias. He felt a renewed determination to address the injustice, knowing that remaining silent would only allow such behavior to continue unchecked. He began documenting everything. He opened his laptop and typed out a detailed account of the events, noting the names of the flight attendants involved, the responses of the gate supervisor, and the reactions of fellow passengers. He included timestamps, flight numbers, and all relevant details that could be important later. This was not just about personal discomfort. It was about holding the airline accountable and ensuring that no one else would experience the same treatment. During the flight, he remained professional, preparing for his meetings and calls. Yet, the memory of the incident lingered in his mind. He thought about how many others had faced similar situations, often without the platform or resources to speak up. He realized that this was bigger than him, that it touched on issues of equality, respect, and corporate responsibility. As the plane approached its destination, he considered the steps he would take once on the ground. He knew he needed to contact the airline directly, escalate the matter to higher management, and seek a resolution. He also planned to share the experience with colleagues and industry peers, not to cause scandal, but to shed light on a troubling pattern of behavior that needed to change. When the plane landed, he remained calm and composed, gathering his belongings and stepping off with confidence. He had faced an unexpected challenge and had handled it with dignity, but he knew the real work was just beginning. He made a mental note to call the airline's corporate office immediately, to demand an explanation, and to ensure accountability. He also thought about the public impact, how this story might resonate with others, and how it could spark broader discussions about fairness and respect in corporate and everyday life. Outside the airport, he took a deep breath, feeling the cool air and the hum of the city around him. He knew this incident would not define him, but it would serve as a reminder of the importance of standing up for oneself and for what is right. He also understood that how he handled this situation could make a difference, not just for himself, but for countless others who might face similar challenges. By the time he reached his car, he had already formulated a plan. He would contact the airline immediately, document the incident thoroughly, and prepare for any follow-up actions necessary. He would remain calm, professional, and persistent, knowing that this was not just a personal matter, but a moment with potential to create change. He felt a sense of purpose, a drive to ensure that respect, fairness, and accountability were upheld, no matter the circumstances. The CEO's experience in first class was more than an inconvenience. It was a catalyst. It highlighted the realities of bias and unfair treatment that still exist, even in settings where wealth, status, and achievement should offer protection. He realized that the story was not only about being removed from a seat, but about challenging assumptions, standing up for justice, and using one's position to demand change. He felt ready to take that step, knowing that his response could inspire others and lead to meaningful action. As he sat in his car, preparing to make the call to the airline's corporate office, he reflected on the journey ahead. He knew it would require patience, persistence, and a firm belief in doing what was right. But he also knew that he was not alone, that his voice could carry weight, and that the incident, while challenging, could ultimately lead to positive change. The events of the day had shaken him, but they had also strengthened his resolve, setting the stage for the actions that would follow and the impact he could make on the airline and beyond. After the flight, the CEO wasted no time in taking action. He had always believed in addressing problems directly, and this situation was no different. He took out his phone and dialed the airline's corporate office. The line connected to a representative who asked for details. Calmly and clearly, he explained everything that had happened. The boarding process, the interaction with the flight attendants, the intervention of the gate supervisor, and how he had been removed from his first-class seat despite holding a valid ticket. He spoke without anger, but his words were firm and precise, making sure that nothing was left out. The representative seemed attentive at first but then became defensive. They suggested that there must have been some mistake on the booking or that the system had malfunctioned. The CEO remained steady, insisting that he had double-checked his reservation and that the airline owed him an explanation. He highlighted the financial and professional implications of the incident, noting that he had been scheduled for important calls during the flight and that the disruption had caused unnecessary stress. He also mentioned the broader issue of respect and equality, emphasizing that this was not only about him but about fairness in general. As the conversation continued, he requested to speak to a manager or someone higher in authority. The representative hesitated but eventually transferred him to a corporate manager. The manager listened politely but still seemed reluctant to admit any wrongdoing. The CEO used this moment to remain calm yet assertive, describing the incident as a violation of his rights as a paying customer and a leader in his industry. He also pointed out that other passengers had witnessed the situation and that social media could easily amplify it if it was not addressed properly. He provided the manager with a detailed timeline of the events, including seat numbers, flight numbers, and the names of employees involved when possible. He emphasized that he expected a formal response and a concrete plan to prevent such incidents from happening again. The manager assured him that the situation would be investigated, but the CEO pressed further, making it clear that a simple apology would not be sufficient. He wanted accountability and proof that the airline would take meaningful action. After the call, he documented everything again, this time including the notes from his conversation with the corporate office. He wrote down the manager's responses, any commitments made, and the tone of the conversation. This meticulous record-keeping was part of his approach to problem-solving. He knew that in situations like this, clarity and accuracy were crucial. Every detail could matter, especially if the case escalated or required public attention. He also reached out to colleagues and trusted peers in the industry to inform them of the incident. He shared the facts without exaggeration, explaining the situation and seeking advice on how to proceed. Some colleagues expressed shock and anger on his behalf, while others suggested strategic ways to handle the matter. They all agreed that his calm, professional demeanor would make a stronger impact than reacting emotionally. Meanwhile, he took steps to prepare for any potential media attention. He wrote a concise statement summarizing the incident, making sure to stay factual and respectful. He avoided assigning blame publicly, focusing instead on the need for fairness and proper treatment. He wanted to ensure that the story, if it reached a wider audience, would highlight the issue without creating unnecessary conflict or sensationalism. He spent the next few hours gathering supporting documents, including emails, boarding passes, and screenshots of communication with the airline. He reviewed policies regarding first-class travel and customer rights to ensure he understood all the rules and regulations. By doing this, he could anticipate any arguments the airline might make and be prepared with clear, factual responses. At the same time, he reflected on the personal impact of the incident. He felt the emotional weight of being treated unfairly despite his status and achievements. The CEO considered how often people face bias or discrimination in various forms and how few have the platform or resources to address it effectively. This reflection strengthened his resolve to not only seek resolution for himself, but also to use his experience to advocate for broader awareness and change. As the day progressed, he continued to manage his professional responsibilities. He joined video calls, reviewed documents, and prepared for upcoming meetings. Even amid the frustration of the airline incident, he maintained his focus on work, demonstrating the balance between personal advocacy and professional obligations. His ability to remain composed under pressure earned respect from colleagues and reinforced the importance of measured, thoughtful action in challenging situations. By evening, he had contacted multiple departments within the airline, including customer relations and executive communications. Each interaction required patience, clear communication, and persistence. He remained polite but firm, ensuring that no detail was overlooked. He emphasized that this was not a personal vendetta but a matter of principle, highlighting the need for accountability and fair treatment for all passengers. During this process, he also began to consider the potential long-term impact of the incident. He thought about the policies and culture within the airline, wondering how many others had faced similar experiences and whether systemic changes were necessary. He considered ways to contribute to a constructive outcome, including suggesting diversity and sensitivity training, improved communication protocols, and better conflict resolution procedures. Late into the evening, he finally paused to reflect on the day's events. Despite the challenges, he felt a sense of control and purpose. He had taken immediate action, documented everything meticulously, and engaged with the airline at multiple levels. He knew that the steps he had taken would increase the likelihood of a meaningful resolution and prevent similar incidents from happening in the future. Before going to bed, he drafted a clear, concise summary of the day's actions and planned the next steps for the following day. He outlined follow-up calls, potential escalation to higher executives if needed, and preparation for any public communication. His plan was methodical, ensuring that every interaction would be grounded in professionalism, accuracy, and fairness. As he rested, he reflected on the importance of staying calm, persistent, and strategic in the face of unfair treatment. He understood that reacting impulsively could undermine his position, while measured, deliberate action could create real impact. This perspective reinforced his commitment to handling the situation with integrity and effectiveness, demonstrating leadership not just in business but in advocating for fairness and respect. By the time he woke up the next morning, he had a clear sense of direction. He knew the airline could no longer ignore the incident and that his persistence, combined with careful documentation and professional engagement, would ensure that his concerns were taken seriously. He felt a renewed determination to see the matter through to a just resolution, knowing that his approach could influence both the airline and public perception in a positive way. News of the CEO being removed from first class began to spread quietly at first. People who had witnessed the event mentioned it to friends and colleagues. A few passengers posted vague accounts on social media, sharing their surprise and confusion. The story quickly gained attention because it was unusual for someone of his stature to face such treatment. People were curious, and the curiosity soon turned into public concern and debate. Journalists and bloggers picked up the story after hearing about it from social media posts. Headlines began appearing, questioning the airline's practices and highlighting the incident. The CEO's experience became a focal point in discussions about customer rights, fairness, and how treatment can differ depending on race, status, or other factors. The story captured attention because it was more than just a travel inconvenience. It was about respect and equality. The CEO was careful to remain professional while the news spread. He did not publicly express anger or frustration. Instead, he issued a factual statement, summarizing what had happened and emphasizing the need for fairness. His message was clear. The focus was on the incident itself, the unfair treatment, and ensuring accountability. This measured approach drew respect from many who followed the story, as they could see he was handling the matter with dignity. Media outlets contacted the CEO for comments. He agreed to speak but insisted on staying calm and factual. During interviews, he described the incident clearly, focusing on the sequence of events, the lack of justification from airline staff, and the impact it had on him both personally and professionally. He also highlighted the broader implications, mentioning how such treatment could affect anyone and why it was important for companies to uphold fairness and respect. Social media discussions became lively. Many people expressed outrage on behalf of the CEO, while others shared similar experiences they had faced in their own travels. Some commentators analyzed the situation, pointing out systemic issues in customer service and highlighting examples of bias and mistreatment in the airline industry. Supporters applauded the CEO for his calm and professional response, noting that it set a strong example for addressing unfair situations. As public attention grew, the airline felt increasing pressure to respond. People were posting comments, sharing articles, and demanding explanations. The CEO continued to document everything meticulously, aware that the growing media coverage could amplify the importance of his actions. He stayed engaged with journalists, ensuring that the facts were accurate and that the story focused on accountability rather than sensationalism. Within the airline, staff and executives began discussing the situation in private. They realized that the public scrutiny was significant and that their handling of the case would be watched closely. Internal meetings were called to assess the incident, review the actions of the flight attendants and gate staff, and determine an appropriate response. The CEO's calm and detailed documentation made it clear that any attempt to dismiss or downplay the situation could lead to further negative attention. The CEO also received messages from colleagues, friends, and industry peers, offering support and advice. Many were impressed by how he had handled the situation and encouraged him to continue documenting and pursuing accountability. Their encouragement reinforced his confidence, and he felt motivated to continue taking strategic, professional action. During this time, he considered the broader societal implications of the incident. He reflected on how subtle biases and unfair treatment could affect individuals in many settings, not just in air travel. He thought about the lessons that could be drawn from his experience, including the importance of standing up for oneself, documenting events thoroughly, and addressing issues through proper channels. He realized that sharing the story responsibly could contribute to positive change beyond the immediate situation. Journalists started to ask questions not only about the CEO's experience but also about the airline's policies and practices. Experts were brought in to comment on customer rights, bias in service industries, and corporate accountability. The story became a case study in fairness and professional conduct, illustrating the impact of one individual taking deliberate and composed action. The CEO was invited to speak on podcasts and in industry forums about the incident. He accepted selectively, always keeping the focus on systemic issues rather than personal grievances. His message was consistent. Fairness, respect, and accountability matter, and companies must take responsibility when mistakes or unjust treatment occur. Listeners and readers responded positively, noting the CEO's ability to handle a difficult situation calmly and strategically. As the story continued to circulate, the airline released a statement. They acknowledged the incident and said they were reviewing policies and training programs to ensure similar situations would not happen again. While the statement did not include an apology initially, it signaled that the airline recognized the seriousness of the matter. The CEO remained measured in his response, noting the acknowledgement but emphasizing the need for concrete action and accountability. In addition to media attention, the incident sparked internal reflection within the airline. Employees began to discuss training gaps, communication failures, and the importance of treating all customers with dignity. The CEO's story became an example for discussions about company culture, customer service, and how organizations respond to high-profile incidents. Meanwhile, public conversations expanded beyond the airline itself. Articles and discussions explored broader topics such as discrimination, customer service standards, and leadership under pressure. The CEO's experience became a reference point for analyzing how individuals in positions of influence could use their platform to bring attention to unfair treatment and advocate for systemic change. The CEO continued to stay focused on his professional responsibilities while monitoring the developments. He did not seek to dominate the narrative for personal gain. Instead, he maintained a focus on accuracy, fairness, and constructive outcomes. His strategic approach ensured that the story remained credible and impactful, gaining respect from both the public and professional communities. As the media coverage evolved, some outlets began interviewing passengers who witnessed the incident. Their accounts corroborated the CEO's version of events, adding weight to the narrative. This increased pressure on the airline to address the situation seriously and prompted discussions among executives about potential policy revisions and accountability measures. Social media platforms buzzed with commentary, shares, and debates. Many users expressed admiration for the CEO's calm handling of the incident, noting that anger or retaliation would have been expected but ultimately less effective. Others discussed the implications for diversity, equity, and inclusion in corporate and customer service settings. The CEO observed these conversations carefully, noting how public perception could influence corporate behavior and systemic change. In the midst of all this, the CEO prepared for a follow-up with the airline. He knew that public pressure, combined with thorough documentation and a professional approach, would likely lead to meaningful responses. He organized his notes, reviewed the timeline, and outlined specific questions and expectations for the airline executives. His preparation reflected his belief in methodical, strategic action rather than impulsive reactions. The attention also prompted discussions within business communities. Leaders and executives analyzed the CEO's actions as an example of professional conduct under pressure. They highlighted the importance of staying composed, documenting incidents thoroughly, and engaging in constructive communication. The CEO's experience became a learning opportunity, not only for the airline but for professionals across industries. Despite the intense public attention, the CEO remained grounded. He understood that the situation, while significant, was part of a larger conversation about fairness, accountability, and respect. He continued to focus on maintaining his own professional responsibilities while ensuring that the incident was addressed appropriately. His ability to balance personal advocacy with professional obligations reinforced the impact of his actions. By the end of this period, it was clear that the story had taken on a life of its own. Public interest, media coverage, and professional discussions had elevated the incident beyond a simple travel mishap. The CEO's approach, calm, methodical, and fact-driven, had turned a moment of personal frustration into a catalyst for broader conversation and awareness. His actions demonstrated the power of strategic, professional responses to injustice and unfair treatment, setting the stage for further developments and meaningful change. As the story continued to grow in public attention, the airline realized that the situation required serious action. Executives called urgent meetings to review the incident and assess the potential impact on the company. They understood that ignoring the matter could result in long-term reputational damage and continued public scrutiny. Internal teams were asked to provide reports on the flight, the employees involved, and any prior incidents that could shed light on the situation. The CEO, meanwhile, continued to monitor the airline's responses carefully. He had received messages from multiple departments, but none had offered a concrete solution or formal acknowledgement of the mishandling. He prepared for a formal engagement with senior executives, ensuring he had all supporting documents, timelines, and witness accounts organized. His approach remained calm and factual, emphasizing accountability rather than confrontation. The airline's board of directors became involved. They were concerned not only about the immediate incident but also about the message it sent to customers and the public. A high-level team was assigned to investigate the situation thoroughly. Their goal was to understand what went wrong, why it happened, and how to prevent similar incidents in the future. This included reviewing staff training, communication protocols, and policy enforcement. During this period, the CEO was invited to meet with the airline's senior executives. The meeting was scheduled carefully, with both sides preparing in detail. The CEO brought all documentation, including emails, photos, boarding passes, witness accounts, and records of previous communications with customer service. He planned to present a clear, step-by-step account of the events, highlighting where mistakes had occurred and how they had impacted him personally and professionally. When the meeting took place, the atmosphere was serious but professional. The airline executives listened as the CEO calmly recounted the incident. He spoke clearly, detailing each step of what had happened and explaining the significance of being removed from his seat. He emphasized that this was not merely about one passenger or one flight, but about ensuring that policies were applied fairly and that all customers received proper respect. Executives asked questions, trying to understand why the situation escalated. The CEO responded with precise details, explaining the timeline and the responses from flight attendants and supervisors. He stressed the importance of accountability and transparency in addressing the matter. By remaining composed and thorough, he made it clear that he was seeking a constructive outcome rather than punishment or confrontation. The airline recognized the weight of the situation. With public attention high, they understood that inaction or an inadequate response could damage trust and credibility. Executives acknowledged mistakes and began discussing corrective measures. They outlined plans for policy review, staff training, and internal oversight to prevent similar incidents in the future. They also discussed the possibility of financial consequences to demonstrate accountability. The CEO listened carefully, asking questions about the steps being taken and seeking assurances that these measures would be implemented effectively. He emphasized that public acknowledgement and internal reform were both essential. His approach reinforced the idea that fairness, respect, and accountability were not negotiable, and that meaningful action was required. After the meeting, the airline decided to take a significant step. They froze or suspended a large portion of operations, investments, or contracts, valued at around $700 million. This action was meant to signal both internally and externally that the company took the situation seriously and that accountability would be enforced at the highest levels. The CEO's persistence and detailed documentation had helped catalyze this decisive response. Following this development, the airline issued a formal public statement. They acknowledged the incident, expressed regret, and detailed the actions they were taking to address the situation. The announcement included commitments to staff training, policy revisions, and internal oversight to ensure fair treatment of all passengers. The CEO was acknowledged for his professionalism and for bringing attention to a matter of importance, setting a precedent for how similar situations would be handled in the future. The CEO continued to monitor the implementation of these measures. He stayed in contact with airline representatives, following up to ensure that promised changes were being executed. He also provided input on training programs, emphasizing the importance of awareness, sensitivity, and effective communication with passengers. His involvement helped shape reforms that were meaningful and sustainable. As news of the airline's response spread, public reactions were largely positive. Many applauded the CEO for taking measured, strategic action that resulted in accountability and change. Social media discussions highlighted the importance of persistence, professionalism, and documentation in resolving disputes. Observers noted that the CEO had transformed a personal challenge into a broader lesson in leadership and advocacy. Internally, the airline used the incident as a learning opportunity. Employees participated in additional training, focusing on customer service, conflict resolution, and inclusivity. Management reviewed policies to clarify procedures and prevent similar misunderstandings. The CEO's case became part of training materials, illustrating the consequences of missteps and the importance of treating all customers with fairness and respect. The CEO's professional network also took notice. Business leaders discussed the incident in forums, analyzing how calm, factual advocacy could lead to meaningful change. They noted that the CEO's approach demonstrated the power of strategic action and the value of documenting interactions carefully. This perspective became a talking point in discussions about leadership, ethics, and corporate responsibility. Despite the intense public attention and corporate response, the CEO remained grounded. He continued to focus on his work, balancing the resolution of this incident with his ongoing professional responsibilities. His measured approach demonstrated that it was possible to advocate for fairness while maintaining professionalism and composure under pressure. Over time, the airline began implementing the changes promised during the meetings. Staff training was updated, communication protocols were improved, and policies were clarified. The CEO followed up periodically to ensure that these measures were effective and sustainable. His efforts contributed to creating a safer and more respectful environment for all passengers. By the end of this phase, it was clear that the CEO's actions had made a lasting impact. The airline had taken serious steps to address the incident, both publicly and internally. Policies had been revised, staff had received additional training, and accountability had been demonstrated at the highest levels. The CEO had turned a personal experience of unfair treatment into an opportunity for meaningful reform, showing how strategic, professional action could lead to significant corporate and social change. With the airline taking serious action and implementing changes, the CEO finally began to see the outcome of his persistence. He was formally acknowledged for his role in bringing attention to the incident and ensuring accountability. An apology was issued, not just for the inconvenience he experienced, but also for the treatment he had received. This acknowledgement validated the effort he had put into calmly and methodically documenting and addressing the situation. The CEO reflected on the journey. From the moment he was removed from his seat, through hours of phone calls, careful documentation, media coverage, and executive meetings, he had stayed composed and focused. He realized that his approach had not only addressed the personal injustice he had faced, but also created a ripple effect that would prevent others from experiencing similar mistreatment. It was a powerful reminder that thoughtful action, persistence, and professionalism could lead to meaningful change. The airline continued its reforms. Training sessions were conducted for employees at all levels, with particular focus on customer service, sensitivity, and communication. Policies were revised to ensure clarity and fairness in decision-making. Staff were instructed on how to handle conflicts and unusual situations without creating further problems. The CEO's case became an example in these sessions, demonstrating the importance of respectful and equitable treatment of all passengers. Public response was positive. People recognized that the CEO had taken a challenging situation and transformed it into a lesson in accountability and leadership. News articles, blogs, and social media posts praised his professionalism and determination. The story became an inspiration for many, showing that even high-profile individuals are not immune to unfair treatment, and that taking measured, strategic action can lead to meaningful results. Colleagues and peers reached out to congratulate him. They noted how effectively he had managed the situation, turning frustration into a constructive outcome. They discussed the lessons learned from his experience, particularly the importance of documenting events thoroughly, remaining calm, and engaging with institutions through clear and factual communication. The CEO shared insights from his experience, offering advice on how to handle similar challenges in a professional and effective manner. As time passed, the CEO noticed the long-term impact of the incident. The airline maintained its commitment to improved training and policy enforcement. Passengers reported better communication and more respectful treatment, suggesting that the reforms were having a positive effect. The CEO felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that his efforts contributed to tangible changes that would benefit others. He also reflected on the broader implications. The incident highlighted the ongoing need for fairness and equality in various aspects of life and work. It reminded him that even those in positions of power must sometimes assert their rights and advocate for justice. By doing so thoughtfully and strategically, one can influence change not just for oneself but for the wider community. The CEO continued his professional duties, integrating the lessons from this experience into his leadership style. He emphasized fairness, communication, and accountability within his own organization, understanding that the principles he championed externally were equally important internally. He encouraged colleagues to document issues carefully, engage with challenges calmly, and focus on constructive solutions rather than reactive responses. Reflecting on the entire journey, the CEO understood that moments of adversity could become opportunities for growth and impact. The removal from first class, initially a shocking and upsetting experience, had become a catalyst for positive change. It taught lessons about persistence, professional conduct, and the power of strategic action in confronting unfairness. The CEO also recognized the role of community and support. Messages from peers, colleagues, and even strangers reinforced the importance of standing up against injustice and maintaining composure. These connections reminded him that while personal effort was crucial, the support and acknowledgement of others could amplify the impact of one's actions. Over time, the story of the incident became a reference point in discussions about corporate responsibility and leadership. Business schools, training programs, and leadership seminars highlighted the CEO's approach as an example of how to address challenges professionally and strategically. His experience demonstrated that advocating for fairness, documenting events thoroughly, and engaging constructively with institutions could lead to meaningful and lasting change. The CEO continued to be mindful of fairness and accountability in all aspects of his life. He used the incident as a reminder that even in positions of influence, one must remain vigilant, assert rights when necessary, and engage thoughtfully with challenges. The lessons from the airline incident became a guiding principle, reinforcing the importance of professionalism, strategic thinking, and empathy in all interactions. The final resolution of the situation provided a sense of closure. The CEO's first-class seat incident had sparked changes within the airline, increased awareness about customer treatment, and offered a broader lesson in leadership and fairness. It also highlighted how individuals, regardless of their status, could use thoughtful action to create impact and drive positive change in organizations and society. Looking back, the CEO understood that the journey was not just about a seat or a single airline. It was about standing up for principles, advocating for respect and fairness, and demonstrating that calm, strategic action could lead to significant outcomes. His approach had set an example for others, showing that professionalism, persistence, and careful documentation could transform moments of personal challenge into opportunities for broader societal impact. Through this experience, the CEO also gained personal growth. He strengthened his ability to handle adversity, enhanced his understanding of institutional dynamics, and developed strategies for influencing change effectively. The incident became part of his narrative as a leader, illustrating the importance of resilience, clarity, and ethical action in achieving meaningful results. Ultimately, the story concluded not with anger or resentment, but with transformation. A moment of unfair treatment became a catalyst for accountability, policy change, and awareness. The CEO's persistence and professionalism ensured that the incident had lasting effects, benefiting not only himself but countless others who would benefit from the reforms and increased attention to fairness and respect. It was a powerful lesson in leadership, integrity, and the impact one individual could make through thoughtful, determined action.